Alright, ready? Are we doing this?
Yeah, we are.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, Cotter.
That's some good shit, I tell you that right now.
It's so smooth.
Somebody lied. Hey guys, here we are today with Jeff Hans. We're doing an interview for him because he did a special short that you guys are going to see. Hopefully you've seen it. And it was for a competition, but we'll get into that more later. How you doing, Jeff?
Good.
Doing good?
Doing
good? Okay.
a burn.
You burn a little bit?
In this area.
Well, hopefully that loosened everything up so that way we can get into this. No nerves. Good to go. So first tell me, how was it filming your first short film?
Enlightening. It was a learning experience. I have been into film for a very long time. I've done a bunch of YouTube videos. I've run multiple channels. And I've never done anything that was that involved, choreographed, and cumbersome and dependent on so many other people and other moving parts to make it work.
So you mean it was the closest to being a professional film shoot that you could get at that time with the equipment that you have?
With what I have available and the set and all of that, this is probably the closest I've gotten to actually making a film. Something that people would call a film. Right,
from start to finish, pre-production all the way into just color grading and then deadline, everything. Almost like you had somebody looming over you saying this has to be done, right?
That's what kind of pushed the whole thing forward, was the fact that there was this deadline. It was for a competition for a YouTube channel called Film Riot. So I've watched them for a very long time, and they are probably one of the biggest inspirations into getting into film because they do everything DIY. They build their own stuff to make films.
Right.
So I think that seeing that they were doing a competition at this point in my film career, and knowing that I have the ability to make at least something worth putting in there, and I knew going into it that there was a very slim chance that I would be able to win, but I did it because I had a place to shoot, I had people that were willing to shoot with me, and I had new equipment that I didn't have previously, so I didn't compete in any of the other competitions, knowing that I couldn't possibly get something cinematic.
Well, let's talk about that, the equipment that you had. So going into the competition beforehand, you only had a T3i, making all the YouTube videos and stuff, so on your Mr. Moo channel. Basically, you had that T3i, you had a microphone. Now, what enhanced your ability to make that, as far as like going right into pre-production? You're not even filming yet. What do you have on your arsenal? Like, what is your bread and butter? You go right to it. What did you use to make this shoot a successful shoot?
The biggest thing was the upgrade to a different lens. So it's a zoom lens, but it has a great depth of field, no matter what length you're at.
Well, and that means like going from a kit lens that's a smaller lens, you got the fatter, more, it's cumbersome, but it actually has a lot more ability to bring in light instead of that 3.5 to, what is it, 5.4 or something?
I think it's 5.6.
5.6, yeah.
But it eliminates your depth of field once you do that zoom in. So if you want to do something that's tight on the face but at a distance so that you have that distance between you and your subject, you're not going to have that that blurred out background that everybody loves and sees in cinematic movies.
Right, so you could shoot in 35 and still have your exposure be the same with this lens.
The other piece is that having a stagnant f2.8, which it's just, for those who don't know cameras, it's the amount of light that you're letting into the lens. So if you have a lower f-stop, then you can shoot in darker settings and still not need additional light to fill that.
And one of the clips that we're going to show, I mean, the light in there is very sparing, so you had to bring your own lighting equipment to make that accent.
I was going for a very dark look. So the problem was being an amateur filmmaker, not knowing exactly what you're doing. I was going for that dark look, so I was trying to capture that in camera, not realizing that after the fact when I edit, that I can bring all of those shadows darker and make it something that looks dark, even though it's properly exposed in camera and looks super bright.
Right. So because you're using a program right now, currently DaVinci Resolve, whereas before you had only heard of that. You weren't utilizing that for everything. So now, in hindsight, which we'll see the director's cut, hopefully, within some of these shots that we're going to do, see the differences between your finished version and your director's cut using DaVinci Resolve and all the stuff that your current arsenal versus that time crunch. So why was there a time crunch? Is that a part of the competition?
Yeah, they gave you 2 months worth of time to film this. So as soon as I saw the video that they said they were going to be doing this competition, I knew that I had very limited time. So I wrote the script for it in like a day, and then I started storyboarding immediately, not knowing exactly where I was going to be filming or what I was going to be doing.
So you got this awesome warehouse. How did you get the access? Like, for a regular filmmaker, you wouldn't have access to something like that. Did you rent it? Is it someplace, a person you know? Like, how did you get access to something like that?
You ask for favors. You use what you have. That's actually my work. And shout out to EMR.
It's a pretty place.
They have the office setting, which is half of the warehouse, and then there's an actual warehouse that houses parts, and it has those sliding gates, and it laid way to a very. And what's funny is the owner thinks that the warehouse is haunted, so that adds an extra layer to.
So all the sound effects you had in there, just like slamming that down. I mean, the owner's gonna, if they watch this, I don't know if you showed it to them, but it's kind of creepy. Like,
oh yeah,
and it's like raw. If you were to take all the music out and everything, you're watching it, and somebody's chasing you. Like,
when we were shooting, the funny thing is. Where the light switches are for the warehouse, they aren't near the office setting. With the office setting is right up where you enter into the warehouse. Okay. So in order to turn those lights on, you have to go through about 50, 60, 70 feet of dark warehouse to get to the light switches. If you're there on a Saturday night and nobody's there, the warehouse makes noises. There's shifting in the roof. Right. There's things that just move. It's a metal building, so like things just move and grow and swell and what have you.
So what you're saying is this film could very well have taken place after a long day working on a Saturday by yourself or with a person, because there's two people obviously in the very beginning of the film. You've got actor Dave and you've got Dan. So they're there and just closing down shop. So that is very well a real feel in that warehouse.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That is kind of scary. It's
right.
Creepy.
So it's the perfect setting because it's already creepy. So when I was turning on the lights and everything, I had to take an small LED panel to kind of like find my way to where the lights were. And of course there were pranks that were played where like Danny would hang out in the warehouse, like, or Jake would hang out in the warehouse, or whoever it was, and they would just like
Did you have any B cameras that you used on the shoot?
We had some backup footage with the T3i. Okay. So that was shot by Dave and Jake, I think, at certain points in either pre-production or the actual production of it on at least one of the nights, because we were limited on a different night. We had to shoot within 2 nights. Oh, wow. So
your whole pre-production schedule was get everything as much ready for those 2 nights because that was your limited.
I've had some experience with music videos and with some narrative film stuff, and I know that you need as much time as possible, so any prep work that you can do ahead of time is going to save you time on set. Right. So if you know what your lighting's going to be, if you know what your framing's going to be, if you know what situation you're going to be in when this person's moving from here to here, then you can eliminate those problems of, oh, we need to move this light over to here, we need to get this stand over here, we need to get the microphone in this position. Right. So,
because otherwise you're just wasting valuable time, because this was a timed competition with only 2 months to go. And you were kind of like a one-man crew throughout the entire pre-production process because you had to do the storyboards, you had to do, figuring out all the scouting, which good. It's good that you were able to have that workspace because you didn't have to go find a location or rent a location, because that's budget that you don't have for a competition you may not win, right?
Right. And, well, I mean, technically, if all is said and done at the location, there was 4 nights that were spent. 1 pre-production night.
Right.
which ended up being a wash because one of the actors was injured prior to us filming, so he couldn't do the running portion of the night, which was the main part.
Yeah, because Danny was he was a substitute.
So the process of getting everything figured out, there's so much that happened that I'm having trouble recalling all of the problems. There were a lot. So originally it was going to be Dave as Mr. Red Tie. And because he was injured, my main character is now null and void. So I needed to find a replacement.
Wow.
So I asked my buddy Danny to step in for him. And the problem with that is the pre-production was done all with Dave, so Dave knew positioning. He knew speed to run with.
And all that
right.
Stuff was just completely thrown out the window at that point.
So the pre-production process was, other than lighting, was completely gone.
So when you guys got to set that day, you basically had to do a short, you just take it right on through one part to the next to make sure that, was it like a guerrilla style at that point, but you knew the shots you wanted? Or did you have to explain everything from the beginning from him for every shot?
It was pretty much run and gun. I mean, we had to go over the process again of the choreography, but everything had to be shot quickly because we were on that time frame. Right. Originally, we only thought it was going to take one because who needs more than 5 hours to shoot for 60 seconds worth of footage?
So, your favorite shot?
It was a shot that made it into director's cut and the original. It was the key shot. It was the main shot that I wanted to get. I knew exactly how I wanted to get it. And part of the pre-production process and why it was so important that we have one person that is the main person, the main character, was because of the speed of how this shot moves.
Right.
So there's a lot of moving parts. It's the part where, eventually it ended up being Danny, but Danny comes through the door into the warehouse. And he slams up against the grate and then comes towards me, towards the camera, towards the camera frame. Now, what people probably won't know are two things. That, one,
there was something special happening during that shot.
There was a couple special things happening during this shot. The shot was done, it looks like it's just maybe a rig that's moving backwards when Danny's moving. But what I actually did is it's three pieces that are moving at the same time. Danny's coming into frame through the doorway into the grate and then coming towards me. The camera is moving forward. I've got it on the DJI Ronin stabilizer to go forward, and I'm sitting on a cart that's used for moving parts.
Oh, so it's like a heavy duty type of.
Right. So I'm sitting on top of that, holding the stabilizer. Jake's behind me, holding the handle for that to move me forward towards him to meet Danny when he hits the grate. So we've got that moving shot of moving forward, and then he pulls back as Danny runs towards me. So there's a lot of moving pieces to that. And the final shot that we ended up using that looked the best was kind of a prank by Danny. He's not wearing pants in that shot. We'll show that here.
So that's your favorite shot, and coincidentally, no pants. That's probably why, right?
It ended up being, and what's funny is when I was cutting it together, I didn't even realize that that was the shot with no pants.
Well, you're watching this thing like a million times editing, right? And then you're like,
I'm like, that shot looks really good. That's the best shot of that. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I extend it just a hair. Yeah. And then I extend it, and I'm like,
you show the little bit of a bottom to where he's not wearing pants.
Danny's got no pants.
That's probably one of my favorite moments when you told me that was, because I wasn't there, obviously.
Right.
But to know that, what props did you use as far as not behind the camera, in front of the camera? We can see some of the props that you used, but what was your favorite prop to use that was actually in the cut or out of the cut?
So we had all the masks.
Which were phenomenal, by the way. It was a pretty cool idea.
I just wanted to do animal masks. I thought it would be pretty creepy to take childhood animals and turn them into something more creepy. Mm-hmm. So the original gag for the masks that I had was going to be lions, tigers, and bears.
Oh my!
So you see the lion at the end, and you see the bear towards the middle. But the tiger never made it into.
But why did it not? What happened?
That was my fault.
Was it like a...
It was a production problem.
Oh, okay, so it was a
So, filming it, there was a lighting issue with lighting that crowbar scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to turn on the lights, and you kind of can't tell... Right. But you kind of can't tell where they are in the warehouse in relation to the original desk, but it's right next to it.
Right.
So it being darked out and then having light, and then I filmed the close-up of the mask with the lights out. So that the back and forth of, oh, the lights are on, or the lights are out, oh, the lights are on, it doesn't match up. So you never get a close-up or a good look at the mask. But if you freeze frame it right where Danny first turns around and sees him, it's blurred out in the background, but you can see that that person is wearing a mask because it's orange. And
but it wasn't up close and personal like you wanted it to.
The mask looks amazing. I mean, I'll put it up here.
I mean, like, we've got it in the background. You can't see it, but I can look at it right now, and I'm like, that is a pretty cool looking mask.
The best part about that mask is that the eyes of the tiger are still on there instead of being cutouts for your eyes. So the eyes are there, and the actor's eyes are right below that.
Okay. In your 2 days actually spent there, what went right? Like, what went just so perfect? Because productions are notorious for having things that go wrong, but a lot of times the things that go right are just things that are automatically taken off the table. But I want to touch base on that because as a new director and someone who is actually, this is your first attempt at an actual short film, like, things that go right has to feel like a godsend.
Most things didn't work.
That's what I was afraid you were going to say.
We'll just start out with most things didn't work. But the things that did work, a lot of the office shot stuff before we get into the warehouse, all of that went relatively smoothly. It was easy to light. It was easy to figure out framing. It was easy to figure out movement.
Okay.
But in the first night, I wanted to get all of the hardest shots done. So, of course, I did my favorite shot because that was the most moving pieces. And most of the chase scene stuff was shot on one night, and then most of the office stuff, and then the very end where we're at the back gate. Danny's at the back gate and then gets confronted by the lion. That is shot. Right? That was all shot on the same night.
Okay.
So I would say that night 2 was definitely a lot more relaxed. Okay. I was very uptight on the first night. I was very frustrated that we couldn't get all 60 seconds worth of this 1 minute short. But the funny thing is, technically I did, because if you see the director's cut has roughly 2 minutes worth of footage.
Yeah, it extended by an entire minute in director's cut. You could see at the time code, like it literally was what you wanted it to be.
It just builds more, and it builds that tension that I wanted to originally build. But unfortunately, it was a 1 minute short, so I wasn't really... I was thinking to the 1 minute short, but I was also thinking to the creating a decent short.
So things that you could attain for 1 minute, but also things that you could... Did you have the director's cut in mind while you were shooting?
No.
Or was that something that you looked at and you were like, wow, I have all this footage, I can make something amazing after the competition's done?
I did a cut of the footage, and it was like 1:45, and I said, this is what I would like to have, and then had to go back to cut 45 seconds worth of footage so that I could have.
So where did you find that time? Where did you take that 45 seconds? Was it at the beginning of the film? Was it at the end? Or was it just kind of cut intertwined between? Because I noticed between the two, that very beginning really sets the setting in the director's cut, but in the 1 minute short, since you had to make it snappy, was literally you just get, boom, Dave walks into the frame, gotta go. But it changes, as you can see in the director's cut.
I wanted to show just how creepy the empty office is and how alone Danny really was. And I didn't get to do that in the short because of the time frame. I knew that the main meat of the video was going to be the chase scene. Yeah. So if I didn't have the chase scene in there, I wasn't going to cut anything from the chase scene, and that was 30 seconds worth of footage, so that's half the video. But the remaining front half and last half suffered the most losses as far as cutting room floor for the competition.
Now, getting to the end of the chase, another problem with production was there was a prop missing. I know about it, you know about it, but that explains the ending, right?
I
You could say cuss words. You could just
fucked up.
Okay.
I fucked up bad.
So what happened?
So, going through the pre-production process, I had this great idea planned that there was going to be a chase scene. And I had this idea for a long time. We have discussed this idea before, but not in this setting and not in this way. Yeah. And it was a chase scene where this guy's getting chased, and he's carrying this box, and he's running down the street and getting to a place. And when he finally gets to where he's going, he opens up the box, and the roommate that he's with, like, eats a donut. And it was just a donut that he was getting chased for the whole time. That was the joke. So the problem was, when we were shooting that initial first shot, I was so preoccupied with getting all of those moving pieces correct, I omitted the fact that Danny was going to be holding a box.
Right.
So the box comes up in the end. We had to find a solution because I couldn't reshoot all that footage. I had one night to get the remaining footage done. Right. So Danny couldn't hold the box for part of it and not all of it. So we came up with a solution that was the dumbest solution, but ended up being we took the box, and I took a monopod, I took some fishing string.
Oh, that was the classic fishing
line, and put it over top of them and dropped it into frame. Yeah. And then just made it super awkward because why not?
I mean, at that point, because you get to the end, at this point you think, okay,
this guy's just going to get murdered.
Right, the killer caught up with him. What else can he do to make that box go in there? Because that's the running joke.
That's the whole point of it, was the fact that this box was going to protect him from this guy, and that was the end. Right. But it was supposed to be sitting on the counter when he goes up to the front, and he's like, what's this box doing here? And then he gets preoccupied with the crowbar guy, and then runs through the whole warehouse, and then he's like cowering in the corner with the box.
This box. Is this
and
what you want?
And the person opens it, stabs it, and
well, fuck. But it's hilarious at the end, in the director's cut too. You accentuated that part more. Kind of made it more of like a mystical, like, oh, this will save you, right?
We cut the music to make it super awkward, just to draw more attention to the ridiculously of that situation.
Now, did you have to erase the fishing line in post?
I didn't.
You didn't. So
no.
it's just there.
I used cuts that.
If you look, you probably have to look really hard to see it, because even when I reviewed it, you can't really see light reflections coming off of it.
Right.
So then that's usually what gives the fishing line stuff.
If you freeze frame, I'm probably sure that you can see it. I tried to use cuts that didn't really show it too much, and I tried to edit it in a way that you didn't really see it.
Right. Well, let's talk about, okay, so in that scene, director's cut versus the regular cut. There was a difference in color in a shirt. Remember what I'm talking about? Yeah, so as you can see on the screen now, there's the two obvious color differences. Just explain what you did there.
So originally, Jake had all of the outfits picked out for each one of the masks, and they were matching to the masks. So if you see the zebra, I love that he had this black and white tracksuit that he's running through the warehouse with.
Everything matched together. It was a great composition.
We didn't get to film the beginning mask and the final mask, which was the tiger and the lion, on the first night. So unfortunately, Jake couldn't be there for that second night of filming, so that's another thing that I had to figure out last minute. Luckily, Dave, who was originally supposed to be Mr. Red Tie, was well enough by that time that he could do those positions because they weren't heavy on running.
Right. It was literally coming into frame and holding the knife, right?
Right. So the outfits that were originally picked out were fantastic for what we were going to do, but I had to last minute, literally an hour before we were filming, tell Dave that he needed to bring additional outfits in order to fit for those two scenes. Right. And dummy me thinking, it's a dark scene. Maybe we should do something that's a little bit lighter in color or brighter in color.
So you can see it pop again.
So that you can see it.
Well,
it was neon and it was abrasive and it was the worst thing in the scene.
So you had to color correct that.
DaVinci Resolve, I was able to isolate that and make an adjustment so that it was less abrasive and actually match the mask in color. So it's more of a goldish, yellowish color instead of a neon green.
Yeah. So with the lion's mane and the color of the mask, you actually had that palette that Jake originally intended to have, but since he wasn't there, that final version of the 1 minute short film just kind of suffered from that part.
The part that I really wish that Jake was available for, because he showed me on the first night of filming the outfit that he had, was the first office guy that says, "Hey buddy, locking up, have a good night."
Yeah, his shirt kind of like mine.
Jake had a turtleneck sweater and like like this vest jacket thing, and he looked like a dick. He looked like the typical office dick. And what I loved about that was, like, if he was going to be the guy at the end that ends up stabbing the donut and eating the donut and leaving, he'd be like, this guy's a dick. This guy's just a dick. So it kind of ended up not playing out that way, but I kind of wish that we had gotten that. It would have been funny for me.
Yeah, but that's hindsight and that's filmmaking.
Right.
Now, you've done YouTube, and you've done commercials for Collector's Corner, and you've also done music videos for Harper Red Studio. Now, what about this shoot in the the post-production made it difficult or easier than having that, like, kind of like cookie cutter, you know what you're going to film versus you don't know what you're going to film?
Well, like we said before, it is guerrilla style, so you're kind of just shooting to get the shots instead of paying attention to all of those minute things that are going to make a big difference later in post-production. So while shooting, coloring was off, the exposure was off, lighting was terrible for most of it. Colors clashed because of outfits and what have you. Skin tones were off. Like, there were so many things that had to be fixed post-production that made the post-production process hours and hours, where it could have been a very simple... But that's the big thing that I came away with, is that if you get things done the correct way and take your time, you won't have to spend all that time on the back end trying to fix what you didn't know how to do. But if it weren't for this short, I wouldn't know how to do that. Right,
you wouldn't have taken steps after that to kind of fix your filmmaking process, right? And then it's almost like you could see why they take 6 to 8 months during filming, even with a very large crew. It's because while the actors are waiting, they're setting all that stuff up.
Do me a favor. Next time you get a chance, just take a little notepad. Watch a movie. Take a little notepad. Go to the end of the film. Watch the credits. Put a little hash mark for every name that's on there.
It's a lot of names.
And then take that, and take that number, and then you put a little division sign above that, and then you put 1. Because that one person did all of the jobs of all of those people.
Yeah, and that was probably in every stage of production was your biggest thing, besides actors, because in acting...
And I can't thank everybody that volunteered to do this enough. I asked, obviously, friends and family and tried to get coworkers involved, and there was an original scene that was planned in post-production that would have been more people, but that just ended up not panning out. It was the scene where Danny backs up into the warehouse, and when he backs up into the warehouse, instead of one person coming out, it was going to be like 10 people just sitting there. Right, and then all of those people chase him before he gets to the back gate of the warehouse. So it was supposed to be like that big moment of like, oh, there's all these people that are after me, but that there weren't enough people, they didn't have the availability, so I had to make it work with what I had.
Right. So now that you've covered a little bit about that, a little post-production, how to fix things. Let's talk about sound. Like, all the stuff that you did was shot. Didn't use any of the stuff that was there. What did you do? Foley? Did you have downloaded sounds? What did you do to make the sound composition in the final piece?
It was a combination of a lot of things. The original competition was to use a website and program called Filmstro. Right. And that is basically a program that makes production music. You can I'll show you the video, put the link in the video for the video from Film Riot, but they explain how it works. But basically there's sliders, and you can increase intensity and basically make a track that is specifically for your film.
So it'll sound different from one director to another.
Right. And somebody can use the same bass music, but create a different soundscape.
Right.
So that was the main piece of the competition, was to highlight that website and that program, which it was pretty awesome. I liked the way that it turned out, but in the director's cut, I ended up not using that music from them because I was just creating different ideas and different soundscapes.
You felt it wasn't exactly what you wanted in that.
And I'm just not skilled enough to utilize that type of software to make it work.
Okay.
So I didn't want to take extra time to try and learn all of that, especially if it's not something that I'm going to be using all of the time.
Oh, okay.
So in addition to that, the sound effects, I couldn't use any sound from the actual production days, so I had to go back and film.
That's the fourth additional day, right?
The fourth additional day was about an hour and a half of me just recording gate slamming, or steps in the hallway, or steps in the warehouse, or the golf club hitting the gate, or the slamming into the gate, or the back gate where Danny's jiggling the gate. So it was a combination of those sounds that I recorded plus some post-production sounds that I equalized and made fit within the scape, just to add that additional, to bring you into the film.
To make you, because it immersed you into it. So like, now what equipment did you use to record? Was it your Rode mic? Was it the NTG? Like, what did you use for your primary recording stuff?
The NTG 4 Plus and the Zoom H4n. And
those two combined.
Those two combined to create that sound.
Did you have to re-record any dialogue? So that's a yes. That's an extra yes. How many times did you do ADR? And what is ADR? That's the recording after sitting there.
Basically, if you record on set and that audio is unusable or not repairable, or say you've blown it out by irreparable damage, you have to record that dialogue after the fact.
So you did that in here in this room,
Yep,
with the actors and sat them down. And you're like, okay, you're gonna watch yourself many millions of times and saying like, blah, 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 blah.
That was me being a victim to the run and gun style of filming that we were doing because I didn't pay attention to all of the moving parts and all of the things. I had the microphone set, I was using the NTG 4 Plus, and I was using the Zoom H4n, so the sound should have been amazing.
Golden?
It should have been great.
Yeah.
And so after the fact, when I was editing, I realized that my H4n was not set to record from that microphone. Rather, it was using the onboard microphones that were on the recorder.
Are you serious?
So that's why I had to do the after recording, recording afterwards.
Just to get that right, put the graphic up now. Those two little microphones, those was what was recording. So like, you could have that anywhere in the room, and it was just like.
So to give you an idea, a microphone has to be as close to the subject as possible. So
to get that crisp, clean.
The microphone was probably about this far off from the subject,
which is amazing.
Which is great. Yeah. But the recorder itself was down by the floor,
holy crap,
attached to the microphone stand. So the distance between those two.
Oh yeah, it's a long distance too. Plus, it probably wasn't directed toward the actor either. So.
Right. So hearing those recordings in post-production and trying to match everything up, I was confused. I was like, wait, where did this happen? And then I went back, as soon as I had heard those audio clips, I went back to the recorder just to see what could possibly be the problem. And sure enough, it was set to the microphone instead of the XLR inputs for the Rode. But now I know to double check that before.
Or try to get as much time as possible before set, because if you know that you're only going to have 2 days, then you need to get people. Holy shit. You've got all the editing the way you like it. You've got everything sounding as good as you can get it. And I'm talking about the first version. I'm not talking about the director's cut. How did you know that you were done? Like, that you could just sit back and you had to let it go and submit to Film Riot?
Well, one, it was a time crunch.
So the time, but was that your main factor that you just said, I gotta stop? Or was it like, were you ever satisfied at that end point?
You never satisfied. You never know when to quit. You kind of have to, you kind of just have to let yourself step away from it for a moment, come back to it, look at it, and say, this is as good as it's going to get with what I have.
Right.
Because it was just the footage wasn't great, the audio wasn't great. It just got to a point where that's what it was going to be.
You give yourself enough credit for what you've got, though. The footage was okay for having not, having the stuff to do proper exposure and all that to the perfect, crew. Right. So what you did have, you were able to recover enough that you could submit something that was literally just a one dude with a bunch of people that you brought in, and you just submitted it. So I think that's
the main point, is that the whole thing was a learning experience. I learned so much just by doing it, probably more than I ever would if I had went to film school, just to be able to produce something and have those problems, have those mistakes. To know, I learned a lot between night 1 and night 2, because night 1 had the expectations of, we're going to get the full 60 seconds, we're going to run through the warehouse, we're going to get the office shots, we're going to get the ending shots, we're going to get all of this perfect, it's going to be easy. Yeah. But you don't take into account that you're working with non-actors, you're working with variables like the lighting and the warehouse and the movement of the camera and the focus and the, I don't have a focus puller. If I had a focus puller, how awesome would that be? But right. there are things that you have that are limitations that you have to, the mantra became, make it work. Yeah. So it just became, okay, this shot's not working, so what else can we do in its place that will make sense for the story?
To achieve almost the same thing, or to get
within the skill level that I am currently at and with the equipment that I have. Right. So it just became a thing of making something out of nothing. Yeah. So in the beginning, middle, and end.
Right. So that way you can still have the project. Instead of scrapping the entire thing, you can make things work out of nothing.
There were so many points that I wanted to just call it quits. When I got the call from Jake on the second night of filming that he was unable to attend, it wasn't a thing of I'm mad at Jake. It was a thing of, what can I do to solve this problem? Yeah. It became instant solve the problem mode.
Of course.
So when I made the call to Dave and asked him if he was well enough to just stand in to do these 2 parts, he said that he could, and then I told him to bring the outfits. There was a fine line that day of this not happening, because the call that I got from Jake, it was, well, I can't do this anymore because I don't have the people that are supposed to be in it. And then the other side of the coin was, even if it's just me and Danny, I will make this work.
Yeah, because what you could have had to do is literally do A and B shots and flip between the two.
And set framing on myself and make it work. It would have happened.
Either way, the film was getting done.
It was getting done. I put my foot down and said, no matter what consequences and what problems and what caveats, it's going to happen.
Well, and most filmmakers probably starting out probably would have been like, this is it. So I think you did a pretty good job for what you got, man.
It's frustrating. Yeah. It was frustrating,
that's the whole part of learning.
But the failures from that have made me more open and more patient, and realize that there are days where you're going to spend an entire 8 hours and not film anything.
So just in case anybody knows, we're in the middle of production for something that we may not get done. But that's the same sentiment. You may have to redo things.
And that doesn't frustrate me now, because I know that there are limitations. There are problems that you're going to come into. So it doesn't really matter that portion doesn't get done, because you can make something else work.
Right. You can make cuts and you can be real. Like if you were to make this a Hollywood blockbuster, it would be completely unrealistic to say, oh, I'm going to make this warehouse blow up with real explosives, because you can't obviously do that. So you got to reel in your creative process to say, make it work, make the film. You know the cast and crew, and you know the computer stuff that you have, and the cameras. And I think with all of that, we can we can say that the final product for the director's cut obviously is a lot better because you had time. But with those constraints, I don't think you could have made anything better with all of the things that had gone wrong.
Right.
And that, I think, is what filmmakers that are watching this is really going to take from that. So you and you...
I mean, that's the biggest thing, is that I want people that are making films to not shy away from it. That's the biggest that I learned, is that you can make films. I hate when people say this, but they say, you know, the equipment doesn't matter, but it honestly doesn't really matter, because even if I were filming on the T3i or on my phone or something like that, you can find a way to manipulate your space and your area and ask favors and find people.
You can use a piece of paper for your white
balance.
You know?
I mean, there's so many little things. There's so many tutorials, and nofilmschool.com and Film Riot and these places that give up all of this advice on how to make films. If you do your research, you'll be okay. The best thing that I can say is go out, make a film. Just do it.
Jeff Hans, new filmmaker, director. Not new filmmaker, because you've been making films, but the only question I have left, and you can tell me or you can tell the camera, would you do it all again?
I will do it every day until the day I die. No, seriously.
Oh my God.
I plan on I plan on making a bunch of shorts. Now that I know the process and some of the problems that can happen, and I'm more prepared mentally for those problems to arise and adapting to them, I think that's part of being a filmmaker and a director, is not just doing the things that are written down on paper as far as a shot list or a storyboard or a script, but getting the shots given what you have. If you have free range of doing anything and everything, then utilize that to the best of your ability. If you're limited with only these things, do the best you can with what that is.
Going back to that mantra of make it work.
Make it
I think that's literally something that I'm stealing from you, because it is something that people don't talk about in filmmaking, at least not openly. I mean, you can see some of that stuff in like the special scenes after a DVD or something like that.
But it's glorified.
It's very glorified, and they don't go into the problems. They don't go into like the stuff. Some of them do. If you watch Lord of the Rings, and they have these things called appendices, they'll go into this thing like where day one, they just changed 4 lines, and they give this actor a script that goes, "This is your new lines." And they're like, "But I just read the script. I have it memorized, know everything.
Right.
Now
right.
I have to go do something." So that's not just a challenge for the filmmaker to make the scene work. It's a challenge for the actor.
And sometimes while you're on set, you film something in a certain way that wasn't intentional, and you have to make an adjustment for that.
Yeah. Or you have to refilm a whole thing. So what would you rather do? Fix it? Make it work? Or spend, possibly on a real film set, a couple $1 million to fix one scene? Which they do.
Which they do.
You know, like Henry Cavill in Justice League with the whole mustache thing. You know about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
You don't want to be that guy.
No.
But anyway, I want to thank Jeff here, my best friend, for letting me film him with 3 of his cameras. And one of mine. It looks kind of good with that 50. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
But I do look forward to working with you and making more things like this. And just telling you guys, you can make movies. And you can make them mean something. But don't get frustrated. Just like Jeff said, make it work. That's going to be a mantra for this channel. Make it work with what you've got. Because you know that in your heart, when you've got that vision, you can continue that as long as you jump over those hurdles. And even if you scrape your knee on the way, if you get up and keep going, that's what really matters. Thanks, Jeff, and thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Yeah.